establishing habits, how to make them stick. I'm going to share with you 3 pieces of advice that I found incredibly useful when I was working on establishing new habits and making sure that they became part of my daily life. So what exactly do we mean by a habit? There's lots of definitions, and I think it's just almost a pattern of behavior. It's something we do almost instinctually, sometimes without even thinking. So when we might be stressed, or we don't have a lot of time, or we're under lots of pressure, we often just default to almost our factory settings, if you will. So when we talk about establishing habits, what we're really saying is we want to change the way we behave. And we want to make certain behaviors more consistent in our life. So I think 7 is a really large number. So I am going to give you 3, I guess, strategies or tips, you could call them. They're not necessarily my own thoughts. So if I got the idea from a video or a speech or something, I will be putting the link to those in the description of this video. And I'd really encourage you, if you've got the time, to go and watch those, because they were incredibly helpful and they're fantastic pieces of work. So the first tip, I guess, is from Jordan Peterson. And I couldn't find the exact speech where he gave the quote that first introduced me to it, but he basically said we should treat ourselves like someone we actually care about. And then he went on to say that we often treat people better than we treat ourselves, or in some cases, people treat their pets better than they treat themselves. And he was like, well, then he started to talk about self-care, and he's like, well, how about you just treat yourself like someone you actually care for? And then the actual speech I have linked from his, he's talking about how to set up a schedule and stick to it. And he was like, a lot of people design themselves a schedule that's a lot like a prison. Lots of, I should do this, I should work out, I should stop doing this, I should do that. And instead he said, no, sit down with yourself, have a negotiation and say, well, I know here are all the commitments I have to do, but if I could design myself the best possible day around all of those, what would it look like? And then that's the schedule you should stick with. And that makes a lot of sense when you think about it, because if I ask you to do something you hate doing and do it, a repetitive amount and enough, do it often enough so that it actually becomes a habit, that's going to be quite difficult, because we don't do things we don't like for long. I had someone that I used to work with once ask me how I was so consistent with my gym routine, because every Wednesday morning without fail I would be at work late. I'd written it off in my calendar so everyone could see Wednesday mornings I was at the gym. And she was like, I've tried going to the gym, I'm trying to get into this routine, but I just can't get it to stick. And I asked her to tell me more about it, and she's like, well, I've got a personal trainer and I go to the gym and he gets me to run on the treadmill. And I was like, oh, I love running. Tell me more about your running. And she's like, well, I actually hate running on the treadmill. And I was like, whew, wait, you're paying someone to tell you to do something you don't want to do? And putting that aside, how long do you think you would do something you don't actually want to do? And I'd say that answer is probably not very long. So when we're choosing what habits we want to develop, let's be kind to ourselves and pick things that we actually enjoy doing, but that will still take us towards whatever goal we would like to be, where we would like to be. The next thing, talk about willpower as a resource, or we've only got a certain amount of action points within the day. Now, the person I got these ideas from, he's actually a video game, personality, but he also gives lots of advice. And in these videos, he was saying that a lot of people, when it comes to starting new habits, particularly around New Year's Day, that they list out 5 things they're going to do. I'm going to join a gym. I'm going to give up smoking. I'm going to drink less coffee. I'm going to, visit my friends on the weekend, and I'm going to learn a new language. And we try and implement all these 5 things at once. And he says, well, your willpower is limited, and implementing each of these habits or starting to get them set up as a habit is going to take energy, is going to take extra mental focus. And if we try to do too many things at once, we're actually not going to be able to do any. And he says instead we pick one thing and focus on that and get that one thing right. And then once that one thing has become a habit, it doesn't take us any extra energy because it's just part of who we are and how we behave. Then we go on and add the next thing and the next thing. And then he also recommends, if you can, that often, if at the end of a work day, you don't have much, I guess, mental willpower left for many people in the types of jobs we have today. So he's like, if you can find a way to work on your habits in the morning before you've exhausted all your willpower, do that. So basically, just be mindful when we're setting up habits that our resources are limited and we want to focus on one thing at a time and try and do that before other things. And then the final thing, this is from a Spartan Up podcast that I really like, is called Spartan Stand. And in this one, it's talking about how important it is to say what we mean and then do what we say. And that is just to be honest with ourselves and to sort of not set ourselves up where we have to break our promise to ourselves. We've all been there. We want to implement something and we're like, I'm going to do this for 5 days a week for an hour. And we know deep down we're not actually going to be able to do that for 5 days a week for an hour because we don't actually want to do that for 5 hours a week, 5 times a day. So to just be honest with ourselves and not put ourselves in a position where we have to break our word with ourselves, because that robs us of confidence. And then it makes it more difficult for us to implement these positive changes we want to see. So if we take all three of those things together, and I think we can sort of combine them and apply them together, we get what I'm calling a positive feedback loop. And it's where we can pick something that we're kind to ourselves, so we've chosen wisely, we've picked a habit that we really want, that really excites us, something we want to do, and then we start with just one chunk of that. We don't overcommit ourselves too early, and then we work on it. And then once we've got that one thing working, we've got all that confidence, we've got all that excitement, we can then add on another chunk and another chunk. And if we're being honest with ourselves and saying what we mean and doing what we say, then that builds even more confidence in us, and then it all just feeds into each other and spirals, and we get this massive growth. And before long, we've completely changed our behaviors. So those are my 3 tips for establishing habits and making them stick.